The cowboy grew up next to a gorilla. 14 years later, fate brought them together again, in the middle of a deadly blizzard. It began years ago on a sprawling animal reserve deep in Montana, where snow often fell thick and heavy, and the mountains stood like stone giants around the Walker Ranch. That's where a boy named Cole Walker lived with his father, Grant Walker, a rugged cowboy and environmentalist who had dedicated his life to rescuing and rehabilitating wild animals. One freezing night, a transport truck carrying exotic animals overturned on a remote road. Among the wreckage, Grant found a terrified, shivering baby gorilla, weak, hungry, and barely clinging to life. He brought the infant back to the ranch, wrapped in his jacket, and nursed him by the fire. When the gorilla opened his eyes, the first person he saw was Cole, a 4-year-old boy with snowflakes in his hair and wonder in his eyes. From that night on, the two were inseparable. Cole named him Boone. They grew up side by side on the Walker Ranch. While most boys his age played with dogs or ponies, Cole's playmate was a gorilla who followed him everywhere, through open pastures, muddy creeks, and sunlit barns. Boone was gentle and patient, always aware of his own strength. When Cole fell while learning to ride, Boone would help him up, patting his shoulder like an older brother. Their laughter, one human, one primal, echoed across the ranch. Grant often filmed their bond, showing the world that kindness could bridge even the widest gap between species. "See that, Cole?" he'd say, watching the two on an old camcorder. "This is how we prove that respect and love are stronger than fear." On Cole's 10th birthday, his father gave him a wooden necklace carved in the shape of a gorilla, a symbol of their bond. "Boone trusts you," Grant told him. "He accepts you as one of his own. That's a gift most men will never understand." But as Cole grew older, he began to understand the true purpose behind his father's work and the larger vision of the Walker Wildlife Foundation. He often overheard long, serious discussions among conservationists, biologists, and his father, who gathered around the ranch kitchen table. Maps and research papers spread before them. They spoke of reintroduction projects in Africa, of sanctuaries and breeding programs, of how every animal deserved to live free, in the land where it truly belonged. Cole listened quietly from the stairs, realizing that the days of playing with Boone were numbered. Boone wasn't just his friend anymore. He was part of something bigger, something wild that called to him from across the ocean. When the day came for Boone's release, the air on the ranch felt heavy. Boone seemed uneasy, pacing his pen as the transport truck pulled in. Snowflakes drifted down from a gray sky as Cole ran to the fence, clutching the necklace in his hand. "Don't forget me, Boone," he shouted, his voice cracking through the cold air. The gorilla turned, pressing his enormous hand against the bars, his deep eyes meeting Cole's. It was a look filled with confusion, sadness, and a wordless understanding that this was goodbye. The men secured the cage, and as the truck rumbled down the dirt road, Cole stood in silence, tears freezing on his cheeks. Years passed. Cole grew into a tall, quiet cowboy, broad-shouldered, sun-worn, and thoughtful. He took over much of his father's work, helping at the reserve, studying the same conservation files he once overheard as a boy. But no matter how many animals came and went, none ever filled the space Boone had left behind. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind moaned through the canyons, Cole swore he could hear the distant echo of Boone's chest-beating call, like a memory trapped in the snow. Then, 14 years after Boone's release, the storm came. It was the worst blizzard Montana had seen in decades, white walls of snow swallowing everything in sight. Cole had gone out on horseback to round up missing cattle, but the storm hit faster than anyone expected. The wind screamed across the plains, the cold biting through his coat like knives. When his horse bolted in panic, Cole was left stranded, alone in the storm, blinded by the snow. Hours passed. He stumbled, breath shallow, calling for help. But the only reply was a low, distant sound echoing from the trees, a rhythmic thump, deep and powerful. He froze. It wasn't the sound of wind, nor an animal he recognized. It was a chest beat, slow, deliberate, and hauntingly familiar. Through the whiteout, a dark silhouette emerged, massive, upright, moving toward him with steady steps. Cole's heart pounded. His mind couldn't believe what his eyes saw, yet he knew. The figure stopped a few feet away, snow clinging to its black fur. Two brown eyes met his, eyes he hadn't seen since childhood. It was Boone. The blizzard was not just cold, it was alive. It screamed through the pine forest like a voice from the grave, tearing at Cole's coat and filling his lungs with shards of ice. Every gust carried whispers that didn't belong to the wind. He staggered onward through the storm, his boots sinking deep into drifts of snow that swallowed sound. Somewhere behind him, the storm roared like a beast, and somewhere ahead he swore something moved. Cole raised a trembling hand to shield his eyes. For a heartbeat through the veil of snow, he saw a dark figure lumbering between the trees. Massive, human-shaped, but not human. He blinked hard, thinking the cold was playing tricks again. But when the figure turned its head, the faint reflection of amber eyes met his. He froze. "Boone?" he whispered, his voice barely rising above the blizzard. For a moment, the name hung in the storm like a prayer, and the creature stopped. It tilted its head, snow-caked in thick black fur, and made a low sound, somewhere between a growl and a sigh. Then slowly it began to move toward him. Cole's throat closed. His breath fogged around his face like smoke. He took one step back and stumbled, falling hard onto the ice. The figure loomed closer now, each step sinking deep into the snow. A hulking shape of muscle and scars. He knew that walk. He knew that sound. It couldn't be. Boone had died years ago, lost in a fire that should have burned every trace of him. Cole had buried what little remained beneath the old oak back home. But now, through the storm and madness, that same creature stood before him. Boone, Cole breathed, the name cracking like old wood. The gorilla stopped a few feet away, steam rising from his broad chest. His fur was matted, burned in places, his right shoulder scarred by something metallic and cruel. He stared down at Cole with eyes full of pain, confusion, and something that made Cole's heart seize. Recognition. The storm shrieked around them, snow slicing sideways, yet Boone didn't move. Instead, he lowered his massive arm, palm open. Cole's breath trembled as he reached out. When their hands met, the heat of Boone's skin shocked him more than the cold ever could. Boone's fingers brushed against the wooden necklace hanging beneath Cole's coat, one carved by Boone himself. Back when things were simpler, before everything had burned. Cole swallowed hard, tears freezing on his lashes. "You remember, don't you?" Boone's eyes softened, and for the first time in years, Cole felt something like hope. But then the wind shifted, and Boone's body stiffened. His head snapped toward the forest behind them. A sound cut through the storm, faint but unmistakable, a metallic clank. Boone's breathing changed. His chest rose in heavy bursts. His lips curled back, revealing yellowed teeth. Then, with a roar that shook the trees, he slammed his fists against the frozen ground, sending snow bursting into the air. "Hey, easy, boy," Cole shouted, stumbling to his feet. "It's just the wind." But Boone wasn't hearing him. His gaze darted toward the tree line, wild and terrified. He backed away, chest heaving, until his back hit a tree. Cole took a cautious step forward, the wind carrying a scent of rust and oil, metal. Cole turned in the same direction Boone was staring. Nothing. Just white. Shifting snow and the endless wail of the storm. Then, somewhere far off, something howled back. Not an animal. Not quite human either. Boone trembled, his fists clenching, a low groan rumbling deep in his throat. Cole didn't wait to question it. He grabbed Boone's wrist and pulled. "Come on, there's shelter nearby. The ranger cabin, remember?" Boone resisted for only a moment, then allowed Cole to guide him through the snow, moving with surprising gentleness for a creature his size. Together they stumbled into the woods, the blizzard closing behind them like a curtain. By the time they found the cabin, Cole could barely feel his legs. The place was old, leaning slightly, its windows cracked and half buried under snow. Boone ducked through the doorframe, his shoulders scraping the wood. Cole fumbled for matches and lit the small hearth. The fire sputtered, weak and orange, but it was enough. For a while, neither of them spoke. Boone sat near the door, his huge frame hunched in the dim light. His eyes never stopped scanning the corners, the walls, the flicker of the fire. Cole watched him silently, still trying to believe he wasn't dreaming. "You look bad, old friend," Cole whispered finally. "What happened to you?" Boone didn't answer, but his breathing grew shallow. He lifted a trembling hand to his chest, revealing deep burn scars that glowed faintly in the light. Cole's stomach turned. Those weren't from the forest or the cold. They were man-made. He wanted to ask more, but Boone suddenly tensed again. His head snapped toward the window. Cole froze. A faint hum drifted through the storm, steady, mechanical. Then just for a heartbeat, two distant headlights flashed across the snow outside. Two distant headlights flashed across the snow outside. Cole's heart jumped. "Someone's out there," he said, rushing to the window. He pressed his face to the frosted glass, squinting into the storm. Nothing, just white. No tracks, no sound. He turned back toward Boone, but Boone was gone. The door creaked open behind him, letting in a knife of wind. "Boone!" Cole called, grabbing his rifle. "Boone!" He stepped outside, snow whipping his face raw. The blizzard swallowed everything, his voice, his breath, his fear. He stumbled forward, following enormous footprints that disappeared into the storm. Somewhere in the distance, the engine sound faded, and another noise replaced it. Chains. Rusty, dragging chains. Cole's stomach dropped as he realized what Boone had been running from. And worse, who might still be chasing him. He tightened his grip on the rifle and stepped deeper into the storm. Unaware that the truth waiting out there would destroy everything, he thought he knew about his own family. The storm had nearly broken him. Hours of chasing Boone's fading tracks through the blinding white had stripped Cole down to instinct. One breath, one step, one heartbeat at a time. The wind screamed through the trees, but somewhere ahead, something massive had pushed through the snow. Boone's prints were deep, uneven, desperate. Cole followed them across a ridge until suddenly the world fell silent. The blizzard eased, the snowfall slowed, and through the thinning veil of ice and wind, Cole saw it. A shape carved into the mountainside, hidden behind decades of frost and neglect. A structure. Steel doors half buried in snow, marked with a familiar symbol, etched into a corroded metal plate, the Walker Wildlife Foundation. Cole's breath caught. His family's insignia. His father's name. He staggered closer, his boots crunching through ice, heart hammering in his chest. The gate was twisted open, one hinge ripped from the wall as if torn by an animal. Boone's bloody footprints led straight inside. Cole hesitated only a second before stepping through. The air changed immediately, still freezing, but heavy with something else. The scent of metal, oil, and rot. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by the dull flicker of emergency lights. Shadows danced across broken glass and overturned equipment. Cages lined the hall, their bars bent outward. On the far wall, smeared, in brown-black stains, was a single handprint, massive, almost human. Boone's Cole's breath trembled. "What did they do to you, boy?" As he walked deeper, the silence thickened until every sound he made, each step, each breath, felt like an intrusion. He found a room that had once been an observation lab. Frost covered every screen, every monitor. He wiped one with his glove. The screen came alive. Grainy security footage flickered on. The images were distorted, jumping between static and moments of horror. Men in white coats circling steel tables. Sedated gorillas restrained by iron bands. Needles, blood. The sound of something screaming behind the walls. Then he saw him. Boone, smaller, younger, strapped to a chair as a drill-like device hovered near his skull. A tag hung from his cage door. Project Ascend. Subject A13. Cole's hand shook as he stepped back, bile rising in his throat. On a nearby desk, scattered papers caught his eye. Most were ruined by water or mold, but one name cut through the smear of ink like a blade. Dr. Richard Walker, his father. Cole's mouth went dry. He picked up another sheet. A typed line read, "Objective, cognitive elevation through neural gene therapy. Predicted outcome, establishment of communicative link between human and primate." His eyes darted to another line, scrawled in handwriting he knew too well. Boone responds well to emotional conditioning, shows recognition of subject Cole, continue bonding exercises. The words blurred as rage and disbelief battled inside him. His father hadn't just studied animals, he'd played God, using the one creature Cole had loved most as his experiment. A sound echoed behind him. Cole spun, raising his rifle. The metallic echo of footsteps moved through the hall, slow, deliberate. Then came a voice, calm and dry, like winter air slipping through a crack. "I wondered when you'd find this place." Out of the shadows stepped Dr. Mason, a tall, pale man wrapped in a heavy coat, his eyes sharp behind cracked glasses. His face was older now, hollowed by years of secrecy. "You look just like your father," Mason said quietly. Curious, driven, naive. Cole aimed the rifle at him. "You did this? You and my father?" Mason didn't flinch. "We changed the world, Cole. Your father dreamed of bridging the gap between man and nature. We made it possible." He gestured toward the shattered glass, the blood-stained walls. "Boone was proof." "He's not proof," Cole hissed. "He's alive." "Barely," Mason replied, "and you don't know what he's become. The fire that destroyed this lab wasn't an accident. Boone slaughtered every technician before escaping. He's not your pet anymore, Cole. He's something else." Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're lying." Before Mason could answer, the far wall exploded inward with a deafening roar. Steel and concrete tore apart as Boone burst through, his massive body framed in snow and dust. His eyes locked on Mason, and a guttural sound rose from his chest, a sound that carried fury, grief, and something far deeper. The alarms blared to life. Red lights spun across the ceiling. Armed guards stormed in, rifles raised. "Don't shoot!" Cole shouted, but too late. The air filled with gunfire. Boone charged, slamming through the line of guards like an avalanche, swatting rifles aside as tranquilizer darts pierced his hide. Each impact made him stagger, but he kept moving, his arms sweeping, roaring, protecting Cole from the storm of bullets. Mason fled down the hall, shouting orders. "Bring him down, don't let him escape again." "Boone!" Cole screamed, diving behind an overturned table. Boone turned, his chest heaving, blood soaking into the snow, blowing through the shattered wall. His gaze met Cole's, just for a second, and something human flickered there. Then, with a final surge of strength, Boone grabbed Cole and barreled through the breach, out into the freezing wilderness once more. The sirens faded behind them. The storm returned with vengeance, howling around their bodies as Boone stumbled through knee-deep snow. His breaths came in ragged bursts, each one weaker than the last. "Stay with me," Cole shouted. "We're almost there, Boone. Just a little farther." Boone's legs buckled near the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley. He fell to his knees, his massive frame shaking. Cole dropped beside him, gripping his fur with trembling hands. "Don't you quit on me," Cole begged. Boone lifted his head slowly. His dark eyes found Cole's, and then drifted down to the necklace hanging around his neck. The same one Boone had carved years ago, with rough hands and a heart that had known no cruelty. He reached out, one finger brushing the wooden gorilla charm. His breath fogged in the air, once, twice, and stopped. "Boone!" Cole's scream vanished into the wind, swallowed by the endless white. He clutched Boone's hand, the storm howling around them like a requiem. Far behind, through the blizzard, the faint glow of the facility flickered and died, and above it all, unseen by Cole, the Walker insignia, his family's mark, burned faintly in the snow, as if mocking him from the grave. The mountains were quiet again. Too quiet. Weeks had passed since the storm, since Boone's body vanished into the blizzard, leaving only broken footprints at the canyon's edge. The snows had melted just enough to reveal what the storm had tried to bury: bloodstains, shredded tranquilizer darts, and the remnants of a life that should never have existed. Cole Walker stood at the rim of that same canyon, the wind whispering through his coat. He'd told the world the truth. He'd faced cameras, reporters, courtrooms. The Project Ascend files, his father's hidden sin, had burned their way across the headlines. Genetic experimentation in the Rockies, they called it. The beast that was human. The son who exposed his father's monsters. The Walker name was gone now, dragged through the mud until it was nothing but ash. Cole should have felt vindicated. But instead he felt hollow, because the one thing that mattered most, the only soul he'd ever truly called family, was gone without a trace. Boone's body had never been recovered. Search teams combed the valley for weeks, finding nothing. No blood trail, no carcass. Just prints. Massive, fading footprints that stopped at the cliff's edge like a story with no ending. Some said the fall killed him. Others whispered he survived, dragging himself into the wilderness. Cole never believed the first version. Boone was stronger than that. Stronger than any of them. And then, one morning, the rumors began. A hunter north of Pine Ridge swore he'd seen something in the timberline, a shadow too large to be a bear, moving on two legs. A farmer found 3 goats missing. A fence bent inward from the outside. Children in the valley claimed to hear strange rhythmic thuds echoing through the forest at night, like the beating of a drum or a chest. Cole didn't want to believe, but he couldn't stay away either. That's how on a cold morning in early March he found himself standing before the ruined remains of the facility again. The snow had settled deep around the collapsed structure, muting everything in a layer of white silence. The Walker Wildlife Foundation plaque was half buried and rusted, the name nearly erased by frost. He stepped inside. The place felt different now, emptier, quieter, but still alive somehow, as though it remembered. Broken cages jutted from the ice-like bones. The air carried the faintest scent of oil and decay. Cole moved slowly, his breath fogging in the stillness. He reached the main chamber where he'd first found the footage, the room where the truth had broken him. The firelight memories flashed unbidden. Boone roaring, glass shattering, gunfire cutting through the dark. He knelt, running his gloved hand along the frozen floor. For a moment he thought he heard it, faint, deep, rhythmic. The same sound the children had described. Thud, thud, thud. He held his breath. The sound stopped. Cole stood scanning the shadows. The only thing that stirred was the wind, moaning through the ruined walls. He almost laughed at himself, haunted by echoes. But then he saw it, just outside the broken doorway half buried in snow. A shape, small, wooden, familiar. He crouched down and brushed away the frost. His hand trembled. It was Boone's necklace, the same one that had hung from his chest the night he fell. The one Boone had carved with those clumsy, gentle hands so many years ago. The wood was cracked, the string frayed, but the carving was unmistakable. Cole's throat closed. He turned it over in his palm, feeling the rough grooves. Then he noticed the prints, massive. Deep impressions leading away from the facility. Toward the tree line, fresh, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. Cole tightened his grip on the necklace and followed. Each step sank deep into the snow. The forest swallowed him whole, its towering trees groaning in the wind. Above, the sky had turned to iron, the light thinning into something pale and ghostly. Boone? His voice was a whisper swallowed by the cold. The woods didn't answer. The prints led deeper, winding through the pines, across frozen streams, over ridges crusted in ice. As Cole followed, he felt the old ache rising again, the mixture of fear and love that Boone had always stirred in him, the kind that blurred the line between man and beast, guilt and grace. He stopped when the wind shifted. Something was moving ahead, slow, heavy. Through the swirl of snow, he saw it, a shape massive and dark walking between the trees. Its silhouette was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, thick fur, a head that turned with quiet purpose. Boone, Cole's heart stuttered. He wanted to run to him, to shout, but his legs wouldn't move. He simply watched, breath shaking in the frozen air. The creature paused, turning slightly. The light caught the curve of its face, the glint of one intelligent, weary eye. Boone was watching him too. For a long, endless moment, neither moved. The wind whispered between them, tugging at their clothes and fur, carrying 1,000 things unsaid. Then Boone did something that made Cole's chest break. He touched his chest right where the necklace once hung. Cole felt his throat tighten. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered into the still air, "Go on, Boone, you're free now." The gorilla seemed to hesitate, as if he understood. Then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the storm. Cole stood there long after the figure had gone, the snow falling heavier, blanketing the tracks until they faded into nothing. He looked down at the necklace in his hand, then at the silent forest, and finally toward the sky, gray, endless, mercilessly cold. Somewhere deep in those woods, a faint echo rolled through the trees, a slow rhythmic beating growing distant, fading into memory. Cole smiled through his tears. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He turned back toward the canyon as the storm began again, whispering through the pines. The sound wasn't quite the wind. It was lower, softer, like a voice carried on the breath of the wild. A voice that said, "Remember." The camera pans upward. Snow drifts between the branches, the light dimming until only the forest remains, a vast, endless white. And in the distance, a shadow moves through the trees, tall, silent, watching, because some bonds never die, they just disappear into the wild. Waiting to be remembered. Subscribe for more dark, forgotten stories of man and nature, where the line between love and survival disappears into the storm. disappears into the storm,